here with Renee. What we're going to try to do today is combine a vendor's perspective with the CISO's perspective, an experienced CISO. And Aembit is in the control business, okay, to help control access, like we've been hearing, between agents and resources. And we'd like to give a perspective on what it means to move from visibility to control. And it's echoing, right, a lot of what we've been hearing so far. We're really happy to take questions during this conversation. I'll let Renee introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Renee Guttmann, and I'm a former CISO. So first, how many CISOs in this room? None? Okay, a couple? Well, I'm up here representing an entire group of people that apparently don't get it, supposedly. According to the first poll, if you were here for that, right? I mean, that's what they said? I don't believe it, okay.
That was your former ones as well.
That was, and formers, so we have to change that. Perception. So I am one of the first people, women in security, and I'll say that the first time I went to RSA, there were 5 vendors, which means there are double at this particular conference, and the first time I went, which was 1996. I implemented the first online banking system as a CISO for Capital One. I went to Time Inc. I became the CISO and the CPO for Time Warner. I was the first CISO at Coca-Cola. And then the first CISO at Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, and the second CISO at Campbell Soup. What you should know about me is that I've been an early adopter. You can look it up, maybe the word's pioneer, but I've always been an early adopter, and it never occurred to me, even when I was building the financial system for people to access their credit cards or financial statements at Capital One, that I would do it without security. There wasn't really a better practice. It wasn't a best practice at the time. It was 1999, and we were like the 3rd company to do it. So I went and I found a bunch of my colleagues, the ones that I knew were thinking forward, and I asked them what I should do. So now I'm not a full-time CISO anymore. I work with, I won't call them startups, but companies that are more early stage, and that I believe are creating transformative solutions. So that's my role here. More to come.
Cool. So what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about culture. Okay, why is it important to start to think about control for AI? Okay, what's the risks? Okay, or advantages of being an early adopter CISO? Okay, and then it's scary to adopt control solutions. Okay, because observability, you can disrupt the environment, right? You'll discover bad things, but control introduces risk, operational risk. So we should talk about that in the context of bringing modern auth, right, a control plane to AI access. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to do a proof of concept. I'll talk about it in the context of Aembit, but I'd like you to think about it more generally. And then we'll summarize with some takeaways from the CISO.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that something has to be done, right? Let me position myself.
Sorry about
that. No worries. It's what happens when you get older. So, AI is being adopted, right? And it's the same thing that we faced when we had SaaS, right? We thought there were 5, and then there were 500, applications until we could start discovering them. And then we came up with some nice words to call them unsanctioned rogue, and I really don't like that type of vocabulary because they are sanctioned. I don't care if somebody put it on a credit card, but somebody knew about it. I've heard the term recently, citizen developers, and I think that's an interesting way to describe what's happening with AI and agentic AI. I mean, people are really doing it, and they have a real business need to do it, even if, a lot of them are also getting pushed from the top to have to do it. So what is the CISO option here, right? And there's 4 choices here, right? Only one of them is wrong, all right? That one that's do nothing is just not an option, I believe. Now, I do go to different events, and I do hear people sort of running from the problem, but it's not the norm anymore. A lot of people are putting in place policy, governance. A lot of those policies say things like, you have to be in compliance to the law. We're going to create a registry so that we ensure that we don't have duplicate tools. And that's not wrong, okay? That's a start. The only thing is that start can't take a year, and I'm talking to somebody who's been working on that thing in the governance committee for over a year. It's just got to start. This conference is, if it leaves you with nothing, it's about the need for understanding what's in your environment, so discovery, understanding the need to manage credential secrets, NHAIs. So I'm not going to debate whether that's necessary or not. What I will say, and I do try to stay up on things. For over a year now, the concept of a control plane for identity has been surfaced. And so it's a space that I've been following. And I really, that's what we're going to talk, that's what David's going to continue to talk about today. But there are people now, so maybe not all CISOs are talking about control planes, but if they go to enough meetings now, somebody is going to be talking about the concept of an identity control plane. And that's where we're going to start. And my job now with Aembit is to continue to propagate that as a notion, as a concept that CISOs need to learn more about and start to embrace as a foundational item. I think that's the piece that, when I was at a meeting last year in the summer, a really well-known CISO was talking, and his guidance to everybody in the room, and there were a lot of CISOs, was start building the foundation that's going to be needed to enable AI. So David, I'll turn it back to you. Oh, we have 2 mics.
That's easy. So can everybody hear? Yeah. So one of the things we're seeing from CISOs is CISOs are saying, my enterprise wants to adopt AI, and I can't say no. I need to say yes. But the problem is that AI is accessing all those resources that people would access, and now how do we expose those resources responsibly to those AI agents, and not, for instance, give those AI agents the usernames and passwords that the users would otherwise use. So essentially, it's what Renee said. You want a control plane. People have been moving to modern auth, call it IAM, call it conditional access, call it zero trust, over the years for user access. How do we move to modern auth for agent access, okay? And we heard this before. You want to be in a place where you authenticate the agent and the user that the agent's operating on behalf of. It's really important to be able to attribute access to the combined entity of the user and the agent, and to distinguish that from autonomous agents and from users acting independently. You want zero scanning privileges. You want to be able to issue credentials, short-lived credentials, just in time. And you want to be context aware. Now, where you get policy from, there's lots of conversations. So it's not like everything's simple to do, but these are the general principles for modern auth. You want to know about what's happening in a centralized place so you can log an audit both for security and for operational. You want to move away from discovering and remediating secrets to short-lived credentials. Okay, we all know that that's the way to do it for user access. We shouldn't retreat from that for agent access. And finally, there's many other systems in the environment that already you use to handle problems and detect and react to problems. SIM and SOAR are examples, but discovery systems play a role in this as well.
Okay, this is the tough part. What's it like to be an early adopter? And I heard a question earlier about what, how do you just prevent people from using human credentials, and the reality is we have to start, right? We have to be seen in lockstep with the business. We have to do this. I would say that it's career limiting not to get in lockstep with the business at this point in time. You do yourself and your department harm, all right? If you don't, if you're a CISO and you're not keeping up and you're stopped at governance or policy, I think you've got a problem. We have 30 years of experience doing identity. What did NHAI say? Shouldn't we learn from the past? Of course we should learn from the past. So the pros, of doing this, and I don't want to read it, but the longer you wait to invest, all right, you're not going to want to retrofit these systems. And forward-thinking companies will make investments now, but they'll put one boat in the water, right? You can course correct one thing. You can evolve one thing, but if you just say, do whatever you want, now you're gonna go back and remediate what? How many of things? So you need to at least put that in place and put in place a technology that potentially, can be evolved and swapped out if you have to do that, but put in place this foundation. The cons, yeah, it's hard. You have to educate the business. I heard that. You have to educate. This is a learning exercise. But security doesn't come without friction. And if you've ever implemented a simulated phishing test, there is friction. I mean, talk to me about friction. I mean, but you know, when David talks about how to do a proof of value, I mean, you can minimize the amount of friction. And I do think that there's a perception that will slow things down, but that's why, you know, these kinds of sessions are so important, so that you can become more aware and learn about how you can insert yourself and be seen as that enabler. The con is also that, you know, mistakes will be made. If 85% of, you know, agentic systems or AI systems are not living into their full potential and the promise, this is the time right now for us to be experimenting alongside the business, right? This is not the time to sit back and wait. So set expectations properly. Yeah, we're all on the cutting edge. Francis said we're evolving. It's fine, it's fair to say, right? This is not a mature space at this point. So David, you answer the question about where to start.
Yeah, so I would say that the cons define where to start, okay? What we're really saying, right, is doing everything too much is too much risk and too much overhead, too much time. And the question is how do you start in the right place and learn some lessons and not continue to build up technical debt? I'd also say that starting is not as hard as you might think it is, okay? So to use an example, I'll use a company that we're working with. They're a pension company. Analysts are using Claude to analyze portfolios, okay? And Claude needs to log in to those data sets just like the user would, okay? And one way of doing this is give Claude the user's credentials. And that's clearly not what you want to do, because Claude ends up with too much rights for too long, okay? So the customer wanted to manage this centrally. And the way that this works is you set up Claude to talk to Aembit to get the blended identity of the user and the agent. And then Aembit's policies define what that blended identity is allowed to access. So the basic things that you can do for a POV is you attach Claude to Aembit and you set policies. And you can pick your own system. I'm using this as a concrete example. And the advantage here is you get centralized management, you get strong attribution, and you get least privilege control over access. This is a highly constrained case. There's lots more complicated AI scenarios, but I bet you in many of your organizations or your customers' organizations, they have scenarios where it's a LLM assisting users, employees, to do jobs and to be more productive.
So our takeaways. I've already said doing nothing is not appropriate. I was everybody's first, second, third, fourth client. CyberArk, so I think I was their third client. Archer Technologies, which have been around forever, I was their fifth client. It's not going to take long for something that's a leading practice or maybe something nice to do today for it to become the best prevailing or the industry standard of tomorrow. That's the one thing that I've seen in 30 years is how fast, you know, something goes from a nice idea to, you know, a must-have. And I would argue we're already at the, you know, move beyond nice and almost at must or at must. And I said it before, I don't think it's a good idea, you know, to stay back, sit back, and not be innovating with the rest of the business. So that's my advice, you know, to my peers at this point in time. You know, it's really about bringing modern auth to AI. And David, I'm going to let you hit it home.
So just in conclusion, zero trust, the journey to zero trust for users was probably about a 15-year journey. We don't have 15 years to do it with that, okay? And also, the business is building the applications, right? It's not only IT that's building the applications. So the question is how do you bring this to an organization that's already down that path and do it in a way that helps the organization move forward? And that's a win for the CISO, which I know is like 2 people in this room, but it's a win for some of us. Thank you.